The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle's courtyard, as Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson adjusted his dress blue uniform one final time. The 28-year-old Marine from Texas had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, but nothing had prepared him for the honor of representing the United States Marine Corps at the international military ceremony taking place at one of Britain's most prestigious royal residences. Thompson had been selected from hundreds of candidates for this diplomatic mission. His record was spotless, his bearing impeccable, and his dedication to the Corps absolute. Standing 6 feet 2 inches tall with broad shoulders and a jaw that seemed carved from granite, he embodied everything the Marine Corps stood for. His chest displayed ribbons earned through blood, sweat, and unwavering courage in some of the world's most dangerous places. The ceremony was part of a broader cultural exchange program between American and British forces, designed to strengthen the already robust alliance between the two nations. Military representatives from both countries would participate in various demonstrations, honor guards, and formal presentations throughout the week. For Thompson, this was the pinnacle of his military career, a chance to show the world what American Marines represented. As he walked through the ancient corridors of Windsor Castle, Thompson couldn't help but be impressed by the weight of history surrounding him. These walls had witnessed centuries of royal ceremonies, state functions, and diplomatic meetings that had shaped the course of world history. The very stones beneath his polished black dress shoes had been walked upon by kings, queens, prime ministers, and generals whose decisions had affected millions of lives. On the other side of the castle, Lance Corporal James Wellington of the Grenadier Guards was completing his own preparations. At 26 years old, Wellington represented the finest traditions of the British Army's most prestigious regiment. Born into a military family with a lineage of service dating back to Waterloo, he had grown up hearing stories of his ancestors, who had served with distinction in conflicts spanning the globe. Wellington stood an impressive 6 feet 4 inches tall, his red tunic immaculately pressed, his bearskin cap positioned with mathematical precision. The gold trim on his uniform caught the morning light as he moved with the fluid grace that came from years of ceremonial drilling. His face was a mask of professional composure, his blue eyes focused and alert despite the early hour. The Grenadier Guards were renowned throughout the world for their discipline, their precision, and their unwavering dedication to duty. Wellington had earned his position through years of rigorous training and had proven himself worthy of guarding the most important figures in the British monarchy. His colleagues respected him not only for his military bearing but also for his quick wit and dry sense of humor that emerged during off-duty hours. Both men had arrived at this moment through different paths, but their dedication to their respective services was identical. Thompson had grown up in a small Texas town, where military service was considered the highest form of patriotic duty. His father had served in Vietnam, his grandfather in World War II, and young Michael had known from an early age that he would carry on the family tradition. Wellington, meanwhile, had been educated at some of Britain's finest schools before choosing military service over a potentially lucrative career in finance. His decision had surprised many of his classmates, but those who knew him well understood that he possessed an innate sense of duty and honor that made military service not just a career choice, but a calling. The morning briefing had outlined the day's events in detail. Both men would participate in a formal ceremony attended by dignitaries from multiple nations. They would stand at attention during various speeches, participate in a joint honor guard formation, and represent their countries with the highest standards of military bearing. Neither man expected that this routine diplomatic event would become something extraordinary, something that would be talked about in military circles for years to come. Neither could have anticipated that their professional paths would intersect in a way that would test not only their training but also their character, their resolve, and their ability to maintain composure under the most unusual circumstances. The castle courtyard began filling with guests as the ceremony's start time approached. Diplomats in formal attire mingled with military officers from various nations, their uniforms creating a colorful tapestry of international cooperation. News crews set up their equipment, preparing to document what they assumed would be a routine but photogenic military ceremony. Thompson took his assigned position near the main entrance, his role requiring him to remain at attention while dignitaries passed by. The precision of his movements and the sharpness of his bearing immediately caught the attention of observers. Every detail of his appearance spoke to the Marine Corps' legendary attention to detail and commitment to excellence. Wellington, meanwhile, positioned himself according to the ceremonial protocols that had been refined over centuries of royal functions. His movements were fluid yet precise, each gesture performed with the unconscious perfection that came from countless hours of practice. The tourists and guests who witnessed his preparation were struck by the seamless way he seemed to embody both martial prowess and ceremonial elegance. As the official proceedings began, both men settled into the focused mindset that their training had ingrained in them. They were no longer individuals, but representatives of their nations, living symbols of military excellence and dedication. The weight of that responsibility sat comfortably on their shoulders, as familiar as breathing. The morning progressed smoothly, with speeches delivered, honors exchanged, and traditions observed with meticulous attention to protocol. Both Thompson and Wellington performed their duties flawlessly, earning approving nods from their superiors and impressed murmurs from the gathered crowd. But as the formal ceremony concluded and the participants began to disperse for a scheduled break, neither man could have predicted that the most memorable part of their day was about to begin. The stage was set for an encounter that would demonstrate the unique blend of competition, respect, and professional pride that defines the world's elite military units. During the scheduled break between ceremonial events, most of the military personnel dispersed to refresh themselves or review their notes for the afternoon proceedings. Thompson found himself walking through a quieter section of the castle grounds, appreciating a few moments of solitude away from the formal atmosphere of the main ceremony. The ancient gardens of Windsor Castle stretched before him, meticulously maintained lawns bordered by hedgerows that had been shaped by generations of royal gardeners. The peaceful setting provided a stark contrast to the structured formality of the morning's events. Thompson allowed himself to relax slightly, though his military bearing remained impeccable even in these private moments. As he rounded a corner near an ornate fountain, Thompson encountered Wellington, who had apparently had the same idea about finding a quiet moment away from the crowds. The British guardsman was standing near a memorial dedicated to military units that had served with distinction throughout the Commonwealth's history, his imposing figure creating a striking silhouette against the ancient stonework. The two men acknowledged each other with professional nods, the kind of recognition that passes between elite soldiers regardless of nationality. Both understood immediately that they were looking at a peer, someone whose dedication to military excellence matched their own. There was no animosity in their initial assessment of each other, merely the natural curiosity that exists between representatives of different military traditions. Wellington spoke first, his crisp British accent carrying clearly in the still air. "Quite an impressive ceremony this morning. Your Marine Corps certainly knows how to present itself with distinction." His words carried genuine respect, the kind that could only come from someone who understood the level of training and dedication required to reach such a position. Thompson replied with equal courtesy, his Texas drawl providing an interesting contrast to Wellington's precise diction. "Thank you. I have to say, watching the Grenadier Guards in action is something else entirely. The precision of your movements is incredible. It's clear why your regiment has such a legendary reputation." What began as a simple exchange of professional courtesies gradually evolved into something more complex. Both men found themselves drawn into a deeper conversation about their respective military traditions, their training experiences, and their understanding of what it meant to serve at the highest levels of their professions. Thompson described the rigorous process of Marine Corps training, from the crucible of basic training at Paris Island to the advanced schools that had prepared him for specialized duties. He spoke of the Corps' emphasis on adaptability, their ability to excel in any environment, and the fierce pride that every Marine carried in the knowledge that they were part of an elite brotherhood. Wellington, in turn, explained the centuries-old traditions of the Grenadier Guards, the meticulous attention to ceremonial detail that was balanced against modern military training, and the unique responsibility that came with guarding the British monarchy. He described how each movement in their ceremonial duties had been perfected over generations, creating a living link to Britain's military heritage. As their conversation continued, both men began to recognize that they were engaged in more than just polite small talk. This was a meeting of two professionals at the peak of their abilities, each representing military traditions that were among the finest in the world. The mutual respect was genuine, but beneath it lay something else. a natural desire to test themselves against a worthy opponent. It began almost imperceptibly. Thompson straightened his already perfect posture just slightly as he spoke about Marine Corps traditions. Wellington's bearing, if possible, became even more precise as he discussed the Guards' reputation for ceremonial excellence. Neither man was consciously competing, but their professional pride demanded that they present themselves as the best possible representatives of their services. The conversation shifted to more specific topics: the weight of their ceremonial equipment, the physical demands of maintaining perfect stillness during long ceremonies, the mental discipline required to perform flawlessly under the scrutiny of crowds and cameras. Each man shared insights from his training, while subtly demonstrating his own capabilities. Thompson mentioned the Marine Corps' emphasis on mental toughness, describing exercises where Marines were required to maintain perfect military bearing under extreme conditions. Wellington responded by discussing the Guards' legendary ability to stand motionless for hours, regardless of weather conditions or distractions, maintaining their composure even when tourists attempted to provoke reactions. As they talked, both men unconsciously began to demonstrate the very qualities they were describing. Their postures became even more precise, their movements more controlled, their bearing more impressive. What had started as a friendly professional exchange was gradually transforming into an unspoken competition. The turning point came when Wellington mentioned a training exercise where guards were required to stand at attention for 3 hours without moving, regardless of what happened around them. Thompson responded by describing a similar Marine Corps exercise, but added that Marines were often required to do so while carrying full combat equipment in challenging weather conditions. Neither man explicitly challenged the other, but the implication was clear. Both were elite soldiers who had mastered the art of military bearing, but each believed that their training had been more demanding, their standards higher, their discipline more complete. Wellington straightened to his full height, his hands positioned perfectly at his sides, his gaze focused straight ahead with the unwavering intensity that had been drilled into him through years of ceremonial duty. It was not an aggressive gesture, but rather a subtle demonstration of the standards that the Grenadier Guards maintained. Thompson responded in kind, his Marine Corps training taking over as he assumed a position of attention that reflected the precision and discipline for which the Marines were famous. His bearing was equally impressive, his focus just as intense, his demonstration of military excellence just as compelling. For several moments, both men stood in perfect stillness, each maintaining the bearing that represented years of training and dedication. Tourists beginning to return from their break noticed the two impressive figures and began to gather at a respectful distance, sensing that they were witnessing something special. The atmosphere around the fountain began to change as more people took notice of the two soldiers. Word spread quietly among the gathering crowd that these were representatives of two of the world's most elite military units, and that they seemed to be engaged in some kind of informal demonstration of their respective capabilities. Camera phones began appearing as visitors realized they were witnessing something unique. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows that emphasized the precision of both men's bearing, creating an image that would soon be shared across social media platforms worldwide. Neither Thompson nor Wellington acknowledged the gathering crowd. Their focus remained absolute, their discipline unshakable. What had begun as a simple conversation between professionals had evolved into something far more significant, a test of will, training, and dedication that would determine which of these elite traditions could produce the most perfectly disciplined soldier. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything the ancient grounds of Windsor Castle had ever witnessed. As minutes passed in complete silence, the gathering crowd grew larger and more fascinated. What had started with a handful of curious tourists had expanded to include dozens of observers, including several off-duty military personnel, diplomatic staff, and even some of the castle's security detail, who had heard about the unusual scene developing near the memorial fountain. Thompson and Wellington remained locked in their positions of perfect attention, neither giving any indication that they were aware of the growing audience. Their breathing was controlled and barely perceptible, their gazes fixed straight ahead with laser-like intensity. Every muscle in their bodies was engaged in maintaining the flawless military bearing that their years of training had made second nature. The crowd began to whisper among themselves, trying to understand what they were witnessing. Some recognized the significance of the uniforms, identifying Thompson as a United States Marine and Wellington as a member of the elite Grenadier Guards. Others simply appreciated the incredible discipline and precision that both men were displaying, even without understanding the military context. An elderly gentleman who introduced himself as a retired British Army colonel quietly explained to nearby observers that they were witnessing something extraordinary. "These are two of the finest soldiers their respective countries can produce," he said in hushed tones. "What you're seeing is pure military discipline at its highest level. Neither man will break until he absolutely must." The tension was palpable, but it was not the hostile tension of enemies facing each other in combat. Instead, it was the electric atmosphere that surrounds any competition between elite performers, whether they are athletes pushing each other to new heights or musicians challenging each other's virtuosity. This was a test of professional excellence, a demonstration of the limits of human discipline and training. As the afternoon sun moved across the sky, the light and shadows around the two soldiers shifted, but neither man showed any sign of being affected by the changing conditions. Tourists began taking photographs and videos, instinctively understanding that they were documenting something remarkable. The images would later spread across social media platforms, generating millions of views and countless discussions about military discipline and professional pride. A group of school children on a field trip became particularly fascinated by the scene. Their teacher, recognizing an unexpected educational opportunity, gathered them at a safe distance and began explaining what they were seeing. The children watched in amazement as the two soldiers remained perfectly still, their young minds struggling to comprehend the level of self-control required to maintain such positions. News of the informal competition began to spread beyond the immediate area. Other military personnel who were participating in the diplomatic events started making their way to the fountain area during breaks in the official program. They understood better than anyone what was taking place, and watched with professional appreciation as their colleagues demonstrated the highest standards of their craft. A small group of active-duty British soldiers gathered on one side of the impromptu arena, their loyalty naturally gravitating toward Wellington. They watched with pride as their fellow guardsmen maintained the bearing that had made the British military famous throughout the world. Their presence was quiet and respectful, but their support for Wellington was unmistakable. Similarly, several American servicemen who were part of the diplomatic delegation positioned themselves where they could observe Thompson's performance. They recognized the Marines' demonstration of core values in action and felt a surge of pride in their fellow Americans' representation of military excellence. Their quiet encouragement was conveyed through their presence rather than words. As the hour mark approached, both soldiers remained as steady as statues carved from marble. Their uniforms showed no wrinkles. Their postures revealed no fatigue. Their concentration remained absolute. The crowd began to realize that they were witnessing something that might continue for an extended period, and many settled in to observe what promised to be an endurance competition of epic proportions. A BBC News crew, having heard about the unusual scene through their contacts at the castle, arrived and began setting up their equipment at a respectful distance. The cameraman, a veteran of covering military events, immediately understood the significance of what he was seeing. He began filming with the reverence appropriate for documenting a moment of exceptional human achievement. The reporter accompanying the crew conducted quiet interviews with some of the military observers, gathering context about the significance of what was taking place. A retired American sergeant major explained that maintaining such a position required not just physical strength but incredible mental discipline. "These men are demonstrating what we call bearing under pressure," he said. "It's one thing to stand at attention for inspection. It's another entirely to do it for an indefinite period, while being watched by hundreds of people." Wellington's breathing remained so controlled that the feather plume on his bearskin cap never moved. His eyes, focused on a point somewhere in the distance, showed no sign of strain or distraction. The red wool of his tunic remained perfectly smooth, the gold braiding catching the afternoon light in exactly the same pattern it had when he first assumed his position. Thompson's dress blue uniform maintained its impeccable appearance, every crease sharp, every button perfectly aligned. His white gloves showed no sign of moisture despite the intensity of his concentration. The ribbons on his chest seemed to represent not just his past achievements but his current demonstration of Marine Corps excellence. The crowd continued to grow as word spread throughout the castle grounds. Diplomats, Castle staff, tourists, and military personnel all found reasons to pass by the fountain area. Many lingered far longer than they had initially intended, drawn in by the mesmerizing display of human discipline and determination. A photographer from a military magazine captured images that would later become iconic, showing the two soldiers in perfect profile against the backdrop of Windsor Castle's ancient walls. The composition seemed to capture something timeless about military service, the dedication of individuals who subordinate their personal comfort to the higher calling of duty and honor. Children pressed close to the rope, barriers that security had discreetly established, their faces filled with wonder at the sight of two men who seemed to have transcended normal human limitations. Their parents found themselves equally captivated, many later describing the experience as one of the most impressive displays of human discipline they had ever witnessed. As the second hour approached, the atmosphere around the fountain had transformed from curious observation to something approaching reverence. Conversations became more hushed, movements more respectful. The crowd seemed to understand instinctively that they were witnessing something rare and significant, a demonstration of human potential that transcended national boundaries and military rivalries. Neither Thompson nor Wellington showed any indication that their resolve was weakening. If anything, their bearing seemed to become even more precise as time passed, as if the pressure of the situation was bringing out the very best in their training and character. The silent duel continued, each man pushing the limits of what seemed humanly possible while maintaining the highest standards of military excellence. As the third hour approached, something remarkable happened that would define how this extraordinary encounter would be remembered for years to come. The crowd had grown to several hundred people, including high-ranking military officers, diplomats, and even some members of the British royal household staff who had heard about the unprecedented display taking place in their grounds. Major General Patricia Morrison, the commanding officer of the American delegation, made her way through the crowd with a mixture of pride and concern. She had served for over 30 years and had never seen such a display of military bearing under voluntary circumstances. Her professional admiration for Thompson's demonstration of Marine Corps values was tempered by her responsibility for his welfare. On the opposite side of the gathering, Brigadier James Ashworth of the Grenadier Guards observed Wellington with similar feelings. The young guardsman was representing everything the regiment stood for, but Ashworth knew that such displays, while impressive, could not continue indefinitely without consequences. The two senior officers made eye contact across the crowd and, with the wordless communication that exists between military professionals, began moving toward each other. They met near the center of the gathering, their conversation conducted in the respectful tones appropriate for the situation. "Your Marine is quite impressive," Brigadier Ashworth said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. "I've rarely seen such dedication to military bearing outside of our own ranks." Major General Morrison nodded, her eyes never leaving Thompson's perfectly motionless form. "And your guardsman is everything I've heard about the Grenadier Guards. This is military professionalism at its finest. But I think we need to consider bringing this to an honorable conclusion." Both officers understood that what they were witnessing had transcended any simple competition. This had become a demonstration of the highest ideals of military service. But it had also reached a point where the welfare of the soldiers involved needed to take precedence over the spectacle they were providing. After a brief consultation, they approached the area where Thompson and Wellington stood. The crowd sensed that something significant was about to happen, and the murmur of conversation faded to complete silence. Even the children seemed to understand that they were about to witness the conclusion of something special. Major General Morrison positioned herself directly in front of Thompson and spoke in a clear, carrying voice that could be heard throughout the gathered crowd. "Staff Sergeant Thompson, you have demonstrated the finest traditions of the United States Marine Corps. Your bearing, discipline, and dedication have honored your service and your country. By my authority as commanding officer, I hereby order you to stand down." The formal military order carried the weight of command and provided Thompson with the honorable conclusion he needed. He had not yielded to discomfort, fatigue, or distraction, but to the lawful command of a superior officer. His response was immediate and precise, executing a perfect about-face movement that drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd, followed by a salute that was returned with equal precision by the general. Brigadier Ashworth moved to a similar position in front of Wellington and delivered his own formal conclusion to the guardsman's demonstration. Lance Corporal Wellington, you have upheld the finest traditions of Her Majesty's Grenadier Guards. Your discipline and bearing have honored the regiment and the crown. You are hereby relieved of this duty." Wellington's response was equally flawless. His movements executed with the fluid precision that characterized the Guards' ceremonial training. His salute to the brigadier was returned with the respect due to a soldier who had represented his unit with extraordinary distinction. The moment both men were officially released from their self-imposed challenge, something beautiful happened that would be remembered by everyone present. Instead of showing any signs of fatigue or relief, both soldiers turned toward each other and executed simultaneous salutes, each acknowledging the other's demonstration of military excellence. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause that lasted for several minutes. Military personnel from multiple nations joined civilians in recognizing what they had witnessed as something truly extraordinary. The applause was not just appreciation for entertainment, but genuine respect for the demonstration of human discipline and professional excellence they had observed. Thompson and Wellington approached each other, their movements still precise despite having maintained perfect stillness for nearly 3 hours. Their handshake was firm and accompanied by expressions of mutual respect that needed no words to convey their meaning. "Outstanding demonstration of military bearing," Thompson said, his voice carrying the warmth of genuine professional admiration. "Likewise," Wellington replied. "The Marine Corps should be proud of your representation today." As news crews conducted interviews and photographers captured the historic moment, both soldiers found themselves surrounded by military colleagues, offering congratulations and expressions of pride. The competition that had begun with a simple conversation about military traditions had evolved into something that exemplified the highest ideals of service, discipline, and international military cooperation. The story spread rapidly beyond Windsor Castle. Military publications around the world featured articles about the spontaneous demonstration of discipline that had captivated hundreds of observers. Social media platforms carried videos that garnered millions of views, with comments from active and retired military personnel expressing admiration for both participants. In the weeks that followed, both Thompson and Wellington received recognition from their respective services. Thompson was awarded a certificate of commendation for his demonstration of Marine Corps values in an international setting. Wellington received similar recognition from his regiment for upholding the finest traditions of the Grenadier Guards. More importantly, the event became a symbol of the mutual respect that exists between elite military units, regardless of nationality. Military academies began using videos of the encounter as examples of military bearing and professional excellence. The story was incorporated into leadership training programs as an example of how competition between professionals can elevate everyone involved rather than creating animosity. Years later, both men would recall the afternoon at Windsor Castle as a defining moment in their military careers. Not because of any combat action or dramatic rescue, but because of 3 hours when they pushed themselves to demonstrate the very best of what their training and dedication could produce. Thompson retired from the Marine Corps as a sergeant major, his career distinguished by steady progression through leadership positions and continued excellence in representing the Corps at official functions. He often spoke to young Marines about the importance of military bearing and professional pride, frequently referencing his encounter with Wellington as an example of how military professionals should conduct themselves. Wellington continued his service with the Grenadier Guards, eventually achieving the rank of captain and serving as an instructor at military training establishments. His experience at Windsor Castle became part of his teaching, used to illustrate how true military discipline comes not from external enforcement, but from internal commitment to excellence. The fountain where their encounter took place became an unofficial point of interest for military visitors to Windsor Castle. Guides began including the story in their tours, and photographs from that afternoon were added to displays about military cooperation between allied nations. Most significantly, the event demonstrated that the highest forms of military competition are not about defeating an opponent, but about pushing each other toward greater excellence. Thompson and Wellington had engaged in a contest that brought out the best in both participants, while inspiring everyone who witnessed it. Their silent duel had shown that true military strength lies not in aggression, but in the discipline, dedication, and mutual respect that define professional soldiers at their finest. The crowd that gathered that afternoon had witnessed something that transcended nationality, service branch, and military rank. They had seen two human beings demonstrate the extraordinary potential that exists when training, dedication, and professional pride combine to create moments of genuine excellence. It was a reminder that the military profession, at its highest levels, is about far more than warfare. It is about the cultivation of human character and the pursuit of ideals that inspire others to reach beyond what they thought possible.